Hey, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of The Intelligent Estate, where luxury meets smart living. I'm your host, Travis Leo, and today we're going to talk about key relationships and partnerships when it comes to designing and installing a home technology system. With me today is Tony Militello from Sound Image in Dallas, Texas, as well as Sam Allgood from Allgood Font and Steel Builders. Tony's a home technology specialist in the Dallas area, been in business for about 29 years, right, Tony? I got that right?
That's correct.
Sam is the principal of AP General Contractors, with nearly 5 years at the helm of his company and a decade of diverse industry experience. Sam has built a reputation for delivering high quality projects that merge technical excellence with client first services. I've asked Tony and Sam to be here together because they've worked on a number of projects together, and I've asked them to be here to talk about building a winning process with your trade partners, how to get them involved as early as possible, how to make sure that the project goes well, how to deliver bad news, as we all know that comes up from time to time. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So Tony, Sam, thanks for being on the Intelligent Estate today. Did I miss anything in the background, Sam, about your company and tell us a little bit about the type of work you do and the markets you generally serve?
No, wonderful. Thank you, Travis. Yeah, so we primarily operate in the high-end residential space here in Dallas, Texas. We're also doing some commercial work now. We recently got engaged for Ellie's over at the Hall Arts Residences. We're doing the penthouse units for Mr. Craig Hall. But what would you specifically like to know about the firm? And
So high-end luxury build. So what's the typical construction value of a luxury home that you're building these days in that market?
we're averaging around 7 million, and that's a weighted average, right? Not every home is $7 million. We have homes up to $40 million, and we have homes that are, 4.5, $5 million. And so weighted average, I'd probably say in that $7, $8 million range. And we're not opposed to a remodel. There's some wonderful remodels, as Tony can attest to. Some of those clients become the big estate job, that $40 million project. So yeah, as far as our scope of work, we really elect to do the most architecturally significant homes in the city of Dallas. So it's not always necessarily about the dollar amount. We recently completed a sub 1,500 square foot home. And that was totally a project that was built around, first and foremost, the client. They were wonderful people, wanted to engage us in a beta architecture studio on that job. And that project had geothermal, solar. Is just a really unique project right in the middle of uptown Dallas, bronze panels on the outside of it. So it's something we could sink our teeth into as an art project for us. So again, it's really not about the value. We all say high end because that's indicative of what we do, but ultimately it's about the quality and the trade partners involved, like Tony, who are the artisans who make this really fun.
So Tony, why don't you tell us a little bit about Sound Image and your background in the home technology space?
It's a long one. I started working at a hi-fi shop while I was going to college, and just kind of fell into the industry through that. Found that I really liked being part of it. It was music brought me into it, and then just kind of kept me in it. Started Sound Image as its own entity, April '97, and stayed with it ever since. And just seen this industry become something. And I remember when I used to not be able to go somewhere, and now people know what we do, right? Before it was, we're still wrestling with, do we call ourselves integrators, or what's the term you like to use, Travis?
Technology professionals is the term that I prefer.
So yeah, so home technology professional is a real thing now, which is great to be part of.
How long have you guys been working together as trade partners?
What is it? How long now is it? Are we at going on 3 years now? Yeah, it's amazing. Time flies. It doesn't feel like that long.
A little bit longer, but yeah, about just about correct. And we almost work exclusively together at this point, Travis. And I'm sure you're going to have some questions, and I'll dig into why that is.
Before you were working with Tony and the team at Sound Image, without naming names, tell me, why are you working with Tony and Sound Image? Less about what they're doing, but what were the frustrations and experiences that you were experiencing with others that caused you to either go find a new provider, look for a new provider, however you ended up having them as part of your trade team?
So it's home technology specialist, right?
There you
And
go.
as you know, that we work with the 1% of the 1%, and these are some incredibly intelligent people. Um, Unfortunately, however, there is new technology coming out every single day, and you need to be with the right partner, the right integrator to help that homeowner, one, understand and assimilate all of that knowledge, but two, proactively service that client for the long term. So I think prior to working with Tony, we've had some experience where, and this isn't universal, right? We've worked with some really great guys in the city, but the integrator experience overall is one of the most complex and actually long-term relationships of our projects. Once the concrete guy is done with a home, he's typically out of there. And fortunately, our guys are because they do good work. Same with the framer. The low voltage provider, they're with us for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, however long that homeowner stays in that residence. And for most of our clients, this is the magnum opus. This is their final home, right? And so working with the proper person who not only fields the questions, looks out for you on the front end, and I know we're going to talk about it, so I'll save some of that on getting them integrated in the pre-con process. But having that person like Tony to come on the back end of a project, service questions, things are inevitably going to come up. I pride myself on answering a question within seconds of receiving a text. Tony often beats me to the punch, right? So that's important for us.
Well, it sounds to me like you probably learned that lesson the hard way in terms of dealing with companies that you probably didn't have the appreciation when you started that the home technology system is a living, breathing organism that lives well past the time that the client moves in. Was there sort of an aha moment that got you to realize, we need to rethink this in a more strategic level than we do, or is this something you guys have been doing for a long time?
Yeah, I think it's more that once we had the exposure to Tony's team and the entire team, so Tony leads it from the top, right? But Tony can't teleport and be in a million places at once. Unfortunately, we're not there yet with technology. And so what Tony's done is he's established guys who are absolute specialists and experts at every level of his organization. So not only from my side, and it's Tony and I, and he has a guy Thomas on his team, we're doing a lot of the heavy lifting on the pre-con side. But whenever we either hand off these projects to our project managers, superintendents, et cetera, those guys who he has in the field are coordinating with our electricians, with our superintendent, and they're not only looking out for their scope, but they're looking out for everybody else's scope around them. And so I think that was the aha, if you want to say, moment for me, is that his guys weren't just coming in, doing their scope, trying to get to the next job. They were coming in, we were doing our pre-install meetings that we like to do. They were providing value and insight into the broader theme and elements of the home, which then overall just lead to a much better experience for everyone.
Tony, does that sound like an accurate representation of your organization and the projects that you guys do with Sam and his team?
Absolutely. I think what it aligns is that our goals are not about necessarily just a budget or just a timeline. It's about a common goal, and we constantly strive to bring that up. We had a very involved project, and we're working in another trade because we deal with other trades, high voltage trades on a project. And I asked Sam proactively. I said I would like to have call for a meeting, just kind of elevate the standard and just tell everyone that we're here to support this group. And what was great about and made me realize why this relationship was so important is that I didn't get any pushback. He was like, "Can I come to the meeting?" Because he had a whole team out there. He didn't have to be in the meeting, but he came to the meeting, which aligns with how I go to meetings, right? And my team was there. We had the whole electrical team there, and we just explained when you do this level of work, you can't cut any corners because best practices and high standards eliminate a lot of paperwork. So it's just, it's that commonality, that common ground of excellence, which has really kind of pushed this relationship and the type of work we're trying to accomplish together. So that's why synergistically, it's such a good fit.
You guys have both kind of talked about what I like to call managing the gray area. And we know in these complex projects, these high end estates and with high end technology, there's a lot of gray area between aesthetics and function and design and framing and physics. In my experience, the best home technology professionals are the ones that manage those gray areas well, and they're willing to dive in on something that may not necessarily be in their lane per se. Sam, it sounds like you've kind of embraced the, hey, let's discuss it, let's work in that gray area. What's important to you as a builder when it comes to that gray area?
Could you elaborate a little bit further of what you mean by that?
The integrator, the home technology professional, may want to install speakers right here. But all of a sudden, well, that's a different type of ceiling aesthetic and it's not going to look as good. Okay, well, we need to figure out a different solution or we need to move them. And instead, somebody could just say, no, that's the speakers we specified. That's what we're going to install. But it usually involves a coordination of design, aesthetics, function, physics that to really make the end product, meaning the estate that these folks will live in, really pop.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that harkens back a bit to Tony and I's relationship that has evolved. And so I think at this juncture, Tony and I are working on that far before we're ever out in the field looking up at the framing and saying, is this going to work? Right? We're working through with the lighting designer, with the truss provider. We are coordinating all the details, making sure everything's going to line up. If there's a 3-inch can, there's going to be a 3-inch aperture speaker, right? And so we're working through that together and trying to figure out not only with each other but with the client, the design team, et cetera, where any shortcomings could befall us as we get into that, out into that realm. And so thus far, I mean, Tony, feel free to speak to it, but it's been pretty fluid because we've done the upfront work right on the front end.
And I would say this, what's nice about when you work with this level, the level of interest and curiosity. Sam has architects that he follows and loves and finds the design process very intriguing and interesting. He probably has an intimate relationship with the most talented interior designers in all of Dallas on a personal and a professional basis. So it's all those personality traits that really make this more creative process and a more engaging process. And no one is cutting corners. Like there's no, it's time for me to, our clocks are always, we make laugh. I joke with him like, "Yeah, I've been doing this 29 years, and sometimes you'll still catch me in the office at 7 p.m. doing something," and he kind of laughs about it. But I think we have that in common. I think that's why the clients get the best of the best.
Sam, you talked about getting them involved early in the process. What's the right stage to get a home technology professional involved in the process when you're building an estate level magnum opus type project?
We're typically involved right on the front end at schematic. And I'm a firm believer at getting the entire team. So that means you're getting a lighting designer. I mean, as soon as the client has approved concept, right, overall concept, and they're starting it to get into that schematic, floor plans are being developed, materials are being realized. We like to get the entire team involved because the reality of it is, and fortunately, we work with truly to Tony's point, the best design teams in the city, and as a result, we all look better for it. But those design professionals, that architect may have an incredible idea about a corner butt glazed window and he envisions a water feature off to the side. But if you bring in a high end landscape architect, they may want a water feature right in front of that corner butt glazed window condition, right? And so I think as it relates to Tony and his crew, we view it in the same manner, right? That low voltage is just as important right at the front end of that project because guess what? You know this. I heard a story recently here. I won't share who it was, but really incredible estate level home. And they forgot to add an AV closet, right? So they get through the framing and everything else. And it's like they're trying to figure it out after the fact. And what does that lead to? Well, it leads to the scale of something that everybody loved in a space, but the client, the interior designer, the architect, everybody felt like this space was being dedicated to one area. Now all of a sudden you're taking from that space. Well, if Tony's not involved on the front end, if he and his team are involved and we don't at least have a pretty good idea about where that system is headed, we may not account for the space period, or we definitely won't account for the amount of space required and how to most successfully do that. How do we help save our client money by shortening runs? Maybe there are ways that Tony and his team could get involved that help the architect space plan that area even better. So I think as soon as possible. I mean, truly, obviously, we're happy to have those front end conversations with the architect team, and make sure everybody we like to call it a pulse check, make sure okay, this is a rough cost per square foot just based on these general things that we're seeing here. But as soon as that's verified and the client feels good about the overall direction and good about that budget that we've given them high level and provided, then we're off to the races. We want to get all the consultants on board because each one of us at this level are specialists, and I can do this for the next 30 years. I'm going to know this much of Tony's trade. Tony does this every single day. We're generalists. We need to know enough about every single trade to be really effective. And I think the same thing applies for the designers and architects in this space, right? They're wonderful at what they do, but that's why we all lean on one another to create this beautiful magnum opus product.
Tony, anything you would add to that, or I mean, different that you might say from your perspective?
Well, I'll just give a scenario. We just recently had a meeting at this very table with Sam. He brought his soup with him. We had the clients, the architect, the assistant architect, and the husband and wife who were both doctors. You know, they have a different knowledge base. They're building their forever house. It's got a basement, which is becoming less unique in a very expensive part of town, and as far as real estate goes. So building a basement makes sense. But one of the first things we did is Sam got us the plans, and before the everyone showed up, we try to find the space, the room that he just talked about that wasn't on the other client's finished house. So we actually start that discussion almost immediately. And this client had a basement feature with a gun storage unit in it, so that there was some desire to maybe put our equipment in that large space, second floor, third floor. And part of it is, you know, we're always competing for storage, right? That's part of the game. But just to have that conversation, that space relations test so early on in the process is just a really great place to discuss you know, how the client's going to live in the house, what they're willing to do, because we gamed it. We looked at what do we win by going to the third floor? What does the basement take? What is it? We ended up landing in the space we originally thought we would. But when you include the client in that process, when you include the architect in that process, the designer came a little bit later in the meeting, so we didn't bore him with that detail because that's not in his wheelhouse. And then we moved beyond that, and then we got into things like, you know, handmade keypads, and those type of things. And it's not something people do everywhere, but it was interesting. You never know where it's going to come from. In this case, the husband wanted a Meljack keypad in his office and in the powder room just to have a little signature, right? A little something unique. It'll be Lutron centralized control in the rest of the house. But these are if you don't have these meetings, and if you're not willing to come in all these meetings, these little things just don't get flushed out early. For me, it's the part I enjoy the most. The creative process is just engaging to me.
Sam, how often when you're doing these projects, when you get engaged and you're sitting down with the client for the first time or early in the process, do they say, you know, I've got an AV guy that I want to work with? Or how many times are they saying, hey, I'm hiring you to build this home for me. You bring on who you want?
Fortunately, from when I started to where I'm at today, it's a great question. I think when I started, we maybe weren't as well known. We were fortunate. We got some really wonderful jobs right off the bat, just based on our history, prior. But I think people were less inclined to just give me carte blanche to say, hey, you get to go ahead and bring on your integrator immediately. That does come up. I think we have gotten to a point now where the latter version of what you described has been the case. And so it's, Sam, who do you suggest? We go visit Tony's office. They get a comfortability with Tony and his team. We go through the products, and Tony doesn't have any problem closing deals, right? But it's because he cares, and clients see that. So at this point, it's shifted. But yes, prior, there were a lot of people who wanted to bring in their own integrator. And as I said earlier on, that's a severe pain point for us if it goes awry. And I think at this stage and juncture, I haven't been around for decades. I'm a little younger than you guys, but I think in the past, the systems, the technology maybe wasn't as robust in there. I think at this stage, a lot of this stuff, if you have an issue with your system, it's not the system, it's the integrator. And frankly, that's not a call I want to field at post construction. This stuff is It's art, it's sculpture. It takes a really long time to build these things and do it extremely well. That client experience shouldn't suffer once you move them into their beautiful home, right? That should just be a really elevated experience for Tony and his team. Usually they don't even know the network went down, right? Because Tony's guys are remoting in immediately. They've been given the alert, boom, it's right back on, and they're smooth sailing.
Tony, from your perspective, when you have a relationship with a high end contractor that you obviously have not only a great professional relationship but a personal relationship, at times it can be hard to deliver bad news, right? We screwed something up. This product is delayed. Something happened. How do you deal with that? So you obviously want to maintain a strong relationship with Sam and his team. You want more referral business down the road, but you also don't want to just tell people what they want to hear because that's not what good partners do. So how do you guys approach it? Because it sounds like you're doing a pretty effective job of doing that.
I think over time you start to build layers of trust, and you have to own your mistakes. It's a cultural thing within an organization, and that has to permeate. And I have to lead by example. So let's say we miss a color change on something, we have to cover that expense. That's on us. If we have a email trail or a text trail that says, "Hey, 15 days ago we asked for this and you delivered that," and if you just have to own it, and you got to run a smart business, a financially secure business, so that when you do make those mistakes, that's part of your business plan. Partners like Sam don't grow on trees. So it's important to maintain a high level of integrity and your accountability so that those relationships are not, one and done. I mean, how many times people like have been in business for many, many years, but they haven't built anything? I think, building comes with layers, foundational layer. If you don't have a good foundation, and, Sam can attest to this as a builder, why build the second, and third floor? It's just
Yeah.
not happening. Yeah, so
Yeah.
these are fundamentals. I think that's how I would approach it. So you just go into it and you take care of it, because I like to say you got to focus on the project you're on, because that's going to bring you your next good project. So whatever it takes to do it right, you just do it. It's as simple as that. I think sometimes we make it more complex than that. I think that's a mistake.
Yeah, Travis, if I may jump in just real briefly, I'll speak to Tony just stepping up, right? We had a project, high-rise penthouse project, incredible project. I think, for all of our front end work, mistakes do happen, right? So we'll own one. There was a little bit of confusion on how we were going to coordinate the shade pocket construction. And so this is a entire penthouse, 7,700 square feet of space. You've got city views to the entire Dallas skyline, right? Curtain wall, etc. And we had a little bit of miscommunication on, was it our trades building out this pocket, how it was going to get constructed. Through the process, we wanted to ensure that it was constructed as best as it possibly could be and clean, right? And so what we ultimately decided upon was a machine Lutron shade product, right? That built out that shade for us, and it was very, very tight tolerances. And so rather than Tony just saying, "Hey, that one's on you," and us then trying to go back to the other trade, our gypsum board assembly trade partner, and saying, "Well, hey, the way your contract read kind of looked like you were supposed to handle all this for us." Tony and I didn't go to the client and say, "Hey, we need all this money." We came to each other and said, "Hey, how do we work on this? How do we fix this together?" The client doesn't ever need to really hear about it, right? We just need to move forward and get this done together. I think in this space, you need to have staying power. These projects, we work with a certain stone fabricator here. He does most of our projects exclusively. One of these slabs may cost $20,000. If he breaks that slab, he steps up and supplies another slab. Other guys say, "Hey, I got to walk away," right? That's never been Tony.
There's a level of sophistication and intelligence that comes with the highest end estates and the builders and the trade partners that work on those. I think that's kind of what you're describing. I think if you had an AV guy, and I hate to use that term, but I'll in a derogatory fashion, because we're all AV guys to some degree, but they're the ones that are going to say, "No, that's not my problem. You go figure it out." And that's not how you build trust and how you build long-term relationships. That also doesn't mean that you eat other people's mistakes, because you have to run a financially healthy
Agreed.
business, and you can't just continue to do that every time somebody else screws up. But it sounds like the team that you surround yourself with approaches it from that, hey, good news can wait, bad news cannot. And when we've got bad news, we'll figure it out.
Totally. Yeah, I've had a lot of clients, we've been fortunate. I finally have something to sell after 5 years. For a while there, I was just selling air because I didn't have any product that was actually under our umbrella. We had done a lot prior. So I had a lot of architects who were recommended us and clients are wanting to go see. And it's like, well, that was at a previous firm, so I really can't, show you these products. So I think at this juncture, when a client comes in and says, we want that product, we say, then you need to utilize our team, right? Because every single trade is so important to that end product. You really don't want me framing your home, right? You also don't want me being the integrator. And so for us to get the level of quality that we consistently deliver now, we have to work with the right trade partners like Tony and Sound Image.
Does that resonate with clients or do you get pushback on that?
You always get pushed back on budget, no matter how much money is being spent. Tony can probably attest to a recent conversation we had. It may be a good opportunity for it if you want to open that one up, Tony, and how we helped navigate that together.
Yeah, the we did a year-long development and design process for a very special project. Stamped on the drawings, our name, all of it, ready to go, and budgets approved. And then we got a curveball thrown at us, and they wanted to take my intellectual property and use it to shortcut the competitive bid. And I had to make a very difficult decision. My friend, who's an attorney for intellectual properties, told me I'm an idiot for giving my intellectual property away. And I was like, well, I'm either going to be damned if I do or damned if I don't. And I just was like, I'm a team player. The trust has to be, will this partner who's on this call with us really stand up and support, believe in what we bring to the table, even if we're more or less, you know? And usually we're more. So at the end of the day, I released intellectual property and we won the job twice. And it had a lot to do with the belief of my partners in this and that we really do make a difference. And not just Sam, but people, other trades. Sometimes we forget, we think about client referrals, we think about architects, lighting designers, interior designers, builders. But let's not forget the other trades, the electricians, the specialty contractors that you treat professionally and look out for and want to work with you. And that happened on this project because the team was a pretty solid team, and they want to work with Sound Image. And to everyone's good credit, it's going to work out, and this client's going to get an exceptional product.
Sam, I assume kind of like you're using Sound Image on most of your projects, you're using the same electrician, HVAC, stone guy, like you mentioned. First of all, is that true that you generally keep the same subcontractors from project to project?
Absolutely. I mean, ideally, we don't have to bid it out to anybody almost universally across trades. That's not the reality, right? And I don't know that I would be totally doing my job if I didn't have a second horse in some of these scenarios. Everybody has a budget. And like I said before, we have to be sensitive to our clients and trying to help them navigate that and it's also home dependent, right? Some of these super, super modern homes, which is primarily what we do, you're going to utilize our framer and you're going to utilize our concrete guy because if you miss, you're going to see it. A traditional home, not that that's any less complex in its own ways, but you may have crown molding to hide some of those things, right? And so I think what Tony's talking about and in this particular case is this arose and a lot of people really kind of came to the forefront, on the back end and said, hey, on this caliber of project, we know what the expectation we're supposed to deliver, right? Electricians specifically, and felt like that the best team to partner with and collaborate with was the Tony's team over at Sound Image. And so went out of their way to push the entire team.
Yeah, and Travis, this is more about my guys and the way that they approach the other people in the field supportively. And it's the tier two and tier three guys that feel comfortable calling my team directly. And we take an approach with our most important trade partners that even if we're not on that project, because we have a certain amount of capabilities internally, we can answer questions very quickly. We create value through goodwill, and we believe goodwill pays a lot of rent. So that's another thing I think is that we forget as trade experts that sometimes being generous with what doesn't work against you, and I think that has a lot to do with fostering those relationships. So I think specialty trades are a wonderful source of partnership as well.
Karma is a powerful force in the universe. Don't ever forget that.
That's a fact.
Sam, from your standpoint, it's got to be really neat when you have that situation and it's not a client advocating for this, it's another trade saying, no, if you want me to deliver the quality that you expect in this property, and I know there's this gray area, this overlap I'm going to have with the technology team, these are the guys I want on that. The fact that they're kind of fighting for each other and they want to work together probably talks a lot about the culture that you've built as a builder within your projects.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's the essence of a home. I talk about it all the time. I mean, even somebody who's not necessarily, we mentioned the doctors earlier, right? I don't think anyone wants the three of us operating on them in the, surgery room, but we all have our specialties. And so I think when you get into a rhythm with your team, there's a shorthand that develops. And so we know what to look out for with one another. And that sense of comfortability and that sense of trust, right, allows all of us to work better, more efficiently, which benefits the client. These, carrying costs on these homes are significant, right? So everybody talks about cost, cost, cost on the front end. Well, how about building your home in a timely manner? How about not having to backtrack, right? So when you have those partnerships and there is that cohesion, it shows. You may not necessarily be able to put a finger on it because it's, well, yeah, that's all really straight, right? It's like, yeah, it's less than a 16th of an inch. That client may not be able to describe it, but they can feel it. And I think that's what's so important to us culturally is when you have a good culture, it's like just our own individual organizations, right? One bad egg and one bad trade on a project that can blow a schedule out of the water. It can really cause a lot of unnecessary issues. And so, yeah, I agree. Having some of the guys who stepped up for Tony on this to go out of their way to speak on his behalf was huge. And ultimately, our client will be the biggest beneficiary of that.
Sam, when you're first talking to a client, when you're in those initial meetings, when they've selected your firm to build their home, what do they know about technology? And before you kind of get them to Tony and his team or whoever you're using on a project, what are the conversations you usually have, and how are they thinking about technology before they get to the integrator?
Tony alluded to it earlier. I'm fortunate to be very close, intimately acquainted, personal friends with a lot of the best designers, in the city and design teams, just design professionals, generally speaking, so architects, et cetera. It's frankly, it's because I love design, right? And so we share a common interest. And so on the front end with clients, oftentimes when I'm speaking to them, it's I can't wait to introduce you to these guys because of the aesthetic benefit involved. I love lighting, right? And I want this very small aperture lighting. I don't like, we call it wall or ceiling acne. And so Tony mentioned Meljack. I love Meljack, right? And so the first chance I get whenever, keypads are being thrown into a conversation, that may be just the architect doing kind of a rough, RCP electrical plan, or it may be the lighting designer's already integrated, which is typically the case. If there's any chance for me to upsell them, I'm going to do it because I'm a firm believer in it. It's not just that I'm trying to sell them an additional dollar. That's actually far from it. I genuinely believe a Meljack keypad enhances a home. Similarly, you know, at my own personal home, I have invisible speakers behind my plaster. That space would be a lot less desirable or beautiful if it was littered with 8-inch speakers everywhere, right? The fact that my wife and I and our kids, our family get to enjoy it, the auditory effect with the speaker system in the plaster, it's incredible. So, yeah, I'm driven first and foremost from an aesthetic interest, and then long term, who is that integrator who's gonna, kind of steward our client for the next decade?
Tony, it sounds like you have an unpaid salesperson on staff, is what it feels like to me.
He understands high finishes. He can talk small apertures. It's just really a gift to understand what high design means as it relates to an intelligent estate. And that's rare. And he's so far ahead of, and just let me talk about Sam for a minute. He's so far ahead of his own curve. It's shocking to me. So for me, being the old guy in the room, it's like having like extra horsepower, little extra flame thrown on the fire. So it's just energetically, it's been great to work with him and watch him grow. And because I trust him, recently he wanted to meet someone, a big developer in town that I have a personal relationship with. And we had a ridiculous red wine lunch together because of it.
Totally unexpected. Not commonplace for me, Travis, but why not?
Well, when you have a builder, or I'll throw interior designers in the same category, that can talk to a client about beauty and design and aesthetics, we as integrators tend to talk about cost and price and function and form, really technology. So we can say, hey, here's this Meljack keypad. Oh, that's expensive. But when the interior designer or the builder says, this Meljack keypad would really make this powder room pop. Oh yeah, we don't care what it costs. Let's do it. It's amazing how the conversation can change, and it sounds like you guys work very well in that fashion. I know you joke about upselling, but you're doing it not because you're trying to sell. You're trying to bring that vision and that home to life for these people.
Absolutely. I think our job, I think a lot of builders, and we get a bad rap for it. So I'm not saying this is universal because we are not one of one. I can assure you of that. But I think the easy thing is just say, yeah, no problem. We can get you this, keypad that costs $100, right? Versus the keypads that 700, 800, $900, right? I think from our standpoint, it is our duty on every facet of a project to give you a good, better, best. You hired us for our expertise. I think a lot of people go out of their way because, in their mind, it helps streamline things just to accept. Our job as professionals in this space are to help steward the client's money, time, interest. And by doing that, if we don't at least expose them to it, then I don't believe I fundamentally, I think I failed at my job. Now, if they see that Meljack keypad and it is of no consequence to them, and they're perfectly fine with a, $200 keypad, great. That's totally fine by me too. It's your home. They may have another area where they want to spend that money.
I love that approach because I think too often, and you kind of hit on it earlier, a client will say, oh, I want 3 bids, or I need multiple bids on whatever scope of work it is. And so you pick and you go get it. Those are generally apples to oranges. There might be somebody good, somebody better, somebody best. There may not be. Pick the right provider and then show them different options. The company you choose is way more important than the product selection that you make, because any of these companies, with no offense to Tony and the sound image team, but anybody can install a Lutron system for you. Maybe they can't do it great, but you have a relationship, you have a trust factor with the team. So let that team bring to you, here's the good, better, best, and let that client ultimately make the decision. That's going to end up with a way better result than 3 bids for apples to oranges scope of work type of thing.
It's I always equate it to like when you go to more of a fine dining experience and everything's kind of a la carte, right? I think it's important to kind of present a proper menu of things. I'll just use an example for our last meeting with the client and the architect together. We went very quickly through the keypad options, and we had all of them samples, and we touched price real quick. And the project has some constraints. It's not budgetless, but they immediately were like, "Yeah, we can do this in 1 or 2 areas. We're not going to do it everywhere because we don't see that value, and we're going to do conventional most every place else. And some places aren't even going to be on the system." But I also covered the ground that, you know what, if you decide when you do your all off that you want those other 3 bedrooms now on the system, we can't shrink the wall acne. Well, we can put a smart dimmer and switch in there. And they're like, that's acceptable. And we did that all in one meeting. We covered that educational process in one meeting and got some direction. And now we're creating already budgets that are based upon the client sensitivities and value proposition. And what was surprising to me is we showed them kind of conventional speakers and small apertures and visibles. And without hesitation, this client was like, we know they're more expensive, but we're going to go with the aesthetically pleasing solution. It's worth it to us. And I would bet money that before that meeting, some of the design team would have been like, oh, I don't think they're going to value that. But we put the power into the hands of the client, which is what we all should be doing.
Sam, I assume when you're done with a project, you go back in and interview your client or have conversations with them when you're done. When it comes to home technology, what's the part of their home after they're in it for 6 months, a year, 2 years, when you go back and visit them? What's the part that that they love and they say, we're really glad that we did this in this house?
Man, it's so project dependent, right? I mean, we've done golf simulators, which obviously, you know, the guys can have a blast with. Typically, it's honestly, it's the auditory experience, the fact that they get to wake up in the morning and have music playing. Everybody can have that. I mean, there's a million ways to obtain audio, but most of our clients, it's just kind of, they've got a big party and the big game's on, and all of their buddies are there, and Tony's team does such a great job of integrating the speaker system, and so that really surround experience, it just heightens those moments socially. And so that's honestly, that's most of the feedback we get. All of our homes have just absolutely incredible lighting design to them, so of course everybody enjoys the dimmability of that. But I think it's the experience that people receive when they're engaging socially, and watching the big game, and they finally, for the first time with their buddies, get to hear, the surround.
We did an episode of The Intelligent Estate a couple of months ago dedicated to golf simulators and planning it and the like. They're really growing in popularity, and people are dedicating a lot of space to them because it's just a really, really good time to have and an entertainment avenue. So take a listen to them if you haven't already done so.
Okay, I definitely will.
Let's talk for a second about what happens when things don't go well. So when you have a breakdown and something happens, breakdown in the process, how do you turn that into a breakthrough? How do you get through it? Because things inevitably happen, and you guys kind of talked about it earlier in terms of, yeah, we meet and we have levels of trust. But let's take that a step further and talk about, what do you, within your organization, what do you train and teach, Tony, so that when those situations happen, it doesn't become a catastrophic thing. It becomes a bump in the road that ultimately leads to a better outcome for the current project and hopefully the next 3 or 4 projects from now.
Well, you can't see my ops here, but I have a grease board that I have my team put best practices on. And we, every time we do something, whether it's the number of links that go onto a particular device chain or all those type of things, we try to create those standards and everything. So we're always getting better. So as an example, a link of the devices may say you go to 62, we cap that at 58 so that we have a little bit of bandwidth, a little headroom. I would say whenever you have an issue with something, it's kind of what we talked about earlier. You get in front of it. I think a lot of people shirk conflict. You cannot be afraid to to uh, to have conflict, to resolve conflict, and to get to a resolve that makes everybody happy. There's an analogy of like sandpaper across a negotiating table. When you're done, the table will be smooth and the negotiation will go well. So that's kind of the idea, that you have to be willing. When you run away from that, it doesn't go away. It just festers. And the type of clients that Sam and I deal with, they get the best table at the restaurant. They get their cars parked out front. They could easily break companies like ours if they chose to. That's just the truth. And if you don't understand that, then you shouldn't be this is not your clientele. So in knowing all those things, that's how we step into it. And that's how we have the reputation we have in this marketplace.
Sam, anything else you would add in terms of the kind of conflict resolution or what happens when issues pop up that Tony maybe didn't cover?
No, I think you did an exceptional job. It's construction. There's always going to be issues that come up. And to Tony's point, these people, this is one of the most important investments, investment, whatever you want to call it, but it's an investment for their joy, right? For their family, for the people who are coming back to them, for each other, if they're a couple. And so anytime conflict comes up, we at our team, we just look at it as an opportunity to present a solution. And if you do that and you do it well, then ultimately you can turn that conflict into an opportunity.
So, Travis, one thing I'd like to add that just came into mind, we tell all of our clients, our shared clients, that we want to be the first call. Now, that takes some burden off of the builder because they're normally the first call for all things in a build, especially after it's freshly completed. We don't do that to undermine anyone. We do that because we have to know so much about what every other discipline does. We can shorten the line to solution, which makes everyone happier. There's been recent talks about what is a realtor's value. And one of the things I thought was so true is what gives realtor value is how quickly they can respond to any potential opportunity. House coming on the market, house going off the market, a client calling, all those type of things. I believe that also applies to what we're doing. So we recently had an issue with some HVAC. It ended up being an issue with the HVAC contracting devices, but we understood the mechanics of it. So we could look at it remotely quickly, get with one of the team partners on Sam's team and diagnose it and get it resolved very quickly. It wouldn't have happened that quickly if we weren't so willing to be the first call. I just think it makes sense. And I think that would be, if I could, because I know a lot of our trade partners watch this particular cast, that would be something I would say, take that with you. Volunteer. Look at these things, these down moments as an opportunity to prove your value.
Well, and as we wrap up here, I was going to ask each of you to give a piece of advice to your peers that may be in the similar situation. So, Tony, I'll start with you. If you're an AV integrator that's going, or home technology professional that's going to be working with a new builder for the first time, what's the piece of feedback you would give them to make sure that that relationship goes as smoothly as possible? And by the relationship, I mean the relationship between the technology professional and the general contractor, but also as well as the homeowner. What's one piece of advice you would give to ensure success in that first project where you get brought on?
Don't ask for things, bring things to them. Don't ask for, I would approach them like, this could help you, this particular thing. Share with them your approach as quickly as possible. One of the things we do in the way that we approach it is we want our room as quickly as possible, usually 8 weeks before move-in, so we can start that rack room process, the deliverables, by being that we start touching things and testing things and working along other people as they're, hair on fire to move in at that move-in date. So I would just say, step into it, be proactive with your new builder partner and see if it's a fit. You may be one and done because it's not a good fit, or it may be someone you want to do every project with, and that's the relationship I have with Sam.
Sam, what advice would you give your builder peers that are interviewing or selecting a home technology company for the first time?
I think if you want to be the best, you have to work with the best. Nick Saban talks about it. A players don't like B players, and B players don't like A players, right? Because you're having to drag them with you. And I think, harken back to kind of everything we've covered on this podcast today, is the best architect teams, the best designers, they want to work with the best builders. The best builders are the best builders because they work with the best trades, the best artisans. And so I think a lot of people miss the forest for the trees early in the pre-con process when we've lost those projects at budget because maybe we were more expensive. Inevitably, almost universally, those clients have come to me however many years later, and I would like to think we would have done it in a faster, shorter time frame. At a minimum, I would like to believe that we would have done it at a higher level, and they've come back and mentioned that they regret that decision. The people who have stepped up despite us competing against a lower number and said, no, we value what you've discussed with us. We value the conversations that we've had with your trade partners. We'd like you to build our home. Those people are still referring us today. And I think this industry as a whole gets a really bad rap. And I think it's really unfortunate. I know Tony talks about it all the time in our space. He says, I want that guy to do better work because if he's doing good work, our industry and my job of selling is easier. And I say the same thing. There's a handful of guys in the city who build a really exceptional home. And if I lose that job to those guys, of course, I never want to lose anything. Our team doesn't want to lose anything. But I know that they're going with another comparable, capable firm. When I lose to the guy who it's apples to oranges, that one's tough for me because I know that that client, that design team, ultimately that product, that vision is never going to get realized in the manner of which it should. So if you want to work with the best, I mean, if you want to be the best, work with the best.
And when you're building the best estates out there, which is what you guys are doing, you want the best team across the board. And that usually comes with a cost, but I think that's very sage advice that when you're building the best, work with the best.
Absolutely.
Well, guys, this has been a great conversation. I think it's a lot that our, home technology professionals can take away from this. But my hope was that this was something where builders and architects and other trade people that are working on these homes can get a perspective of a high-end builder and what's important to them. And I think you guys have really done a good job of covering that. So, thank you for being on the Intelligent Estate today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, Travis, thanks for having us on.